On the subject of coworkers, we are now talking about the workplace and what makes a good workplace. Seattle author Ruchika Tulshyan is the author of the new book, Inclusion on Purpose. I spoke to her specifically about what this means for workers who are women of color.
When we talk about corporate and inclusion and diversity, a lot of the topic is focused on what's the experience of women, and that has largely centered white women, especially in the media and a lot of the literature that we have that exists right now. And I really wanted to firmly put the conversation where it belongs. And research shows that the women and the people having the most negative experiences in the workplace are women of color. And so I decided to write a book focusing on intersectionality.
What do you think right now some of the biggest problems, the main problems when it comes to workplaces right now?
Some of the big problems today are a lack of understanding of what the issues are facing women of color today. This could be facing more subtle acts of inclusion, what we commonly know as microaggressions, being asked to constantly validate that you belong there, validate your credentials. These are more subtle acts of exclusion. And then it ranges all the way into harassment and other really, really egregious forms of exclusion. And I think that one of the issues is that there is a lack of awareness of how this impacts almost every woman of color who is in the workplace today.
How can we talk about this? How can we make people aware in a daily setting?
The first thing that I think is important is to create a culture of psychological safety drawn upon the work of Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. We find that psychological safety culture really where folks feel safe to speak up, to take risks, to surface issues, are not going to face retaliation because of that. We find that those sorts of cultures are very innovative. They can really contribute to big growth. As we create, work cultures where it's more okay to speak up, more than okay, encouraged even to speak up, I think we'll start seeing more leaders understand what this looks like for women of color.
Is there a mentorship that can help, or are there ways people can reach out to try to avoid this or find a path towards success, I guess?
My focus has always been on creating a more inclusive culture rather than one that fixes women or teaches women of color. We need more leaders to understand that these are not micro. They actually do end up causing quite a big impact on the careers, and both in terms of internally how women of color feel about themselves. I've talked a little bit about, the myth of imposter syndrome, but it also has a very material impact on the careers of women, and especially women of color, who gets picked for those big leadership opportunities, who gets asked to lead the team, who gets asked to speak up in the big meetings. And I think a lot of that gets compounded due to these more subtle under the surface acts of exclusion, which is hey, I don't think that, your leadership material, or in a meeting, it's like, I don't think Ruchika's leadership material, who's going to even remember her name? Those sorts of things compound and they really add up. And so where I think a coaching program could be valuable, and, some early data shows it could be, is when more leaders and managers get coaching around, hey, this is what it looks like. Here's why, you might be complimenting a woman on her coding skills and showing surprise, or you might be, complimenting Ruchika, talking about how great her English is, but here's why that's not really, that's not the right thing to do, and how that actually impacts, the knock-on effect of a woman of color's career.
You talked about creating psychological safety. So how can we go about creating that in the workplace?
I have found to be really effective is creating a culture where it's okay to fail. It's okay to take risks. And the more managers and leaders, people with both societal status and privilege, mostly white men, speak up and say, hey, I really made this big mistake. And to me, this is really important for how we're going to grow in our team. I feel it's really important for us to have a culture of failure and innovation, and let's make it okay to talk about making mistakes, right? The other is really creating a culture where if someone reports, for example, you're talking about your colleague who reported an incident of bias or microaggression, rather than it being like, oh, well, we heard about it, but we're not going to do anything. take action, have actual steps that you're going to take to address issues of bias, exclusion, microaggressions, whatever you call it.